here in this model, we want to learn the concept of priority, meaning that sometimes we are modeling systems in which entities have different priorities. A very good example in the service industry is, for example, when we go to the hotel industry and things like that, where we have VIP people and the regular customers. And then when there are VIP people, they may get higher priority in getting processed if they are in the line compared to regular people. And that can happen in the manufacturing process as well. So we may have different orders that come to the system, but some orders may have higher priority to get processed, although the other orders were in the system longer, but the orders with higher priorities are going to get processed faster. And we want to see how potentially we can capture such scenarios in ProModel. So in this model, we are going to capture a system in which we have two types of orders or jobs that come to the system to get processed: domestic jobs and export jobs. And both these jobs, when they come to the system, stay in their own corresponding queues. And from there, both of them go to the machining center, and from machining center to the lathe machine, and from there to the outgoing queue, and then they leave the system. The only thing is that export jobs have higher priority to get processed, meaning that if I have jobs waiting in domestic queue and I have jobs waiting in the export queue, and the jobs in domestic queue have been waiting longer, I'll work on the export jobs. The machining center works on the export jobs first, and then if there's no export job, then they switch to domestic jobs. Although export jobs may have just arrived and they have not been waiting that long, but they have higher priority. So the machining center wants to first make sure there is no jobs waiting in the export queue. Then if there's no export job waiting in the queue, then the machining center can switch us to the domestic jobs and pick from domestic jobs and get and process them. So we just want to see how we can capture this part. So the structure of the model is quite simple. I want you guys to please create a new model in the folder for week 7, name it as export job priority. And in this model, we are going to have 5 locations: domestic queue, export queue, machining center, lathe machine, and outgoing queue. For all the queues, put capacity of infinity, first in, first out. For the machining center and lathe machine, put capacity of 1. I have specified the processing time on these machines. And the only thing we want to capture here is that export jobs have higher priority than domestic jobs to get processed. And then the last thing is that the domestic jobs come to the system with inter-arrival time of 30 minutes. Export jobs come to the system with inter-arrival time of 40 minutes. Both of them are exponentially distributed. These are my locations: the domestic queue, export queue, machining center, lathe machine, and outgoing queue. For the queues, I put capacity of infinity, first in, first out. The other 2 machines have capacity of 1. I have the domestic entity and the export jobs and the arrivals. They come to the system one by one from the start of the simulation for as long as I run the simulation, and these are the inter-arrival times of each, exponentially distributed. And then for the processing, as I said, the processing was simple. Here I define the processing for each one of them explicitly. So domestic jobs go from the incoming queue, the domestic queue, sorry, the domestic jobs go from domestic queue to machining center, from machining center to the lathe machine, from the lathe machine to the outgoing queue, and from the outgoing queue to exit. We put the processing time as I specified initially. And for the export queue, we go from the export queue to the machining center to the lathe machine to outgoing queue, and then outgoing queue to exit. And we also put the processing times for each one of these separately for the machining center and the lathe machine. Now we want to take care of the priority part. The priority part is at this point, when they go to the domestic jobs and export jobs. When they go to the machining center, they have different priorities. When we want to give higher priority to export jobs, so we have to go to the lines or to part of the process where we specified the domestic jobs go from the queue to the machining center, and also the part when export jobs go from the queue to the machining center. And in those lines is where we have to specify which one of these jobs will have higher priority to get processed at the machining center, okay? So let's go to the line, these two lines, that when the jobs go from domestic queue to the machining center, and also when the export jobs go from export queue to the machining center, okay? So right here at the destinations, if you click on the destination and the line where the domestic jobs go from domestic queue to the machining center, you see here at the bottom, it has priority. It's always empty, like there's nothing there. So that's where we can specify the priorities. That is basically the priority of these entities at this destination compared to other entities who may get to that destination. So the numbers that we put for the priority can vary between 1 to 999. Okay, so any number between 1 to 999, you can put in the priority. And the higher numbers means higher priority. The magnitude of the numbers doesn't affect the priority at all. As long as you have a higher number, you have a higher priority. So if I want to give that export jobs higher priority, so for this one, for example, I put number 1 for the priority. That's for the domestic jobs. When they go to the machining center right at the destination, I give them priority 1. And then for the export jobs, when they get to the same destination at the machining center, I give them a higher number. For example, I give them number 10 for the priority. That means the export jobs, when they get to the machining center, will have higher priority. The magnitude of the number does not matter. As long as it's higher number than the previous one, that's all that matters. Here, I could put number 2 and I still get the same results. I can put number 500 and I still get the same results. As long as the number that you put for the higher priority entity is greater than the other entity, the priority of the other entity that has lower priority, that's all that matters. The magnitude of the number does not matter. And as I said, the numbers that you can put in the priority can vary between 1 to 999. And let's run this for 800 hours. This is what I get for the export jobs. I'm going to process about 100, 1200, and for the domestic jobs, I'm processing about 1600. Yeah, for the domestic jobs, we have shorter inter-arrival time, so we just get more and more domestic jobs anyway. For the export jobs, we get them one every 40 minutes. For the domestic jobs, we get one every 30 minutes. So obviously, we have more domestic jobs, and we need to process, and we end up processing more. However, we give high priority to export jobs, and we process those as long as they are in the queue. And as you can see, that's something we can see in the time in the system. You see, yeah, we do have less export jobs because they have longer 40 minutes of inter-arrival time, and obviously we get less of export jobs, but then they spend a lot less time in the system. 43 minutes compared to 186 minutes for the domestic jobs. So since they have higher priority, so they get processed a lot faster. Domestic jobs end up waiting in the queue a lot more to finally get processed. And that's what we see in average time in the system. So please save your model for that as well. So as you saw, there was nothing tricky. It was just a little tweak that you had to do in your model to capture the priority. So for the priorities, just make sure that you change the priority or you assign the priority at the destination in which priority matters. If the priority matters at machining center, we have to go to the lines where the entities get to the machining center and then assign the priorities and give higher priority to the entity that has higher priority.